What up, everybody? It's Beltway Football on Monumental Sports Network. It's been a busy, busy week for the Washington Commanders. He's the big man, and Jahan Dotson now plays for the Philadelphia Eagles. Mitch, this is a big one.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big surprise. We've heard the complaints all camp about kind of Dotson's body language and what we've seen from him on the field. But for him to be traded within the division for a third, they also have to give up a fifth out there. There wasn't a lot of faith in him out in the NFL world, if that's where he ended up.
Dude, I'm not surprised, maybe not shocked that he was traded. I am pretty surprised to land in the division with the Eagles. I think it's a really good landing spot for Jahan, but we got to talk about how we kind of landed here, right? I think Dan Quinn, Adam Peters come in with this culture of competition, like on steroids. Like all they care about is competition all the time. And I think Jahan Dotson thought he had secured kind of a higher status.
His role in the NFL. He thought that he kind of figured out where he was.
And obviously, they disagreed on that. Do you think Jahan should have had a different, do you think he had a leg to stand on No.
After last season, nobody should have a leg to stand on, period, but particularly anybody on the offense. I mean, they didn't do a whole lot. They weren't efficient, and for him to come to this camp with a new coaching staff, basically an entirely new offensive group, you can't come in expecting anything. And, for him to be acting pouty because he's being asked to return punts or he's catching balls in the second quarter of the first preseason game, it's just not the best look for him. And quite frankly, maybe this offense might be better off without him on the field.
I don't know about that.
You heard from what Cliff said, what Cliff Kingsbury said, which was super quick and said, hey, it's all about effort without the ball. That's a big problem if your guy's not giving a whole lot of effort.
He's saying that specific to Dan Q and then blocking. I agree with that, but I do think there are significant questions at wide receiver, even with Dotson, and now without him. We've known Jahan since he was drafted. Always been nice, always been a pro. But clearly things went sideways. And you wonder when they're building this competition culture, and they mean it sincerely, right? When Jaden Daniels buys into it, and he's the number 2 overall pick, when Terry McLaurin buys into it, and he's clearly cemented as a starting wideout, as the best wideout, when you bring in veterans like Zach Ertz, Bobby Wagner, Austin Eckler, and they're buying into it, everybody better buy into it. And I do think that's part of what landed him in Philly.
Yeah, I mean, there's competition across the field. We've joked about the competition charade at quarterback because we knew Jaden was just that good that he was going to be the starter. Too many J names that are a little off, but across the roster, we're seeing this competition, both offense and defense, and we're not seeing a lot of other guys who are not into it.
Right.
And it sticks out the fact that he is. And Dan Quinn has talked about, I know people are sick of culture, but talked about wanting folks that play hard, that are fighting for their spots, and Jahan, I don't think they were seeing enough out of him.
So I want to be clear. I don't know that he wasn't playing hard, right? When you're on the field, people are going hard. But there is kind of an acceptance or a reluctance to completely buy into the, oh my gosh, we're competing every second of every day in all facets, in the film room and everything else. And I think for me, there were a few moments along the way, but when he was in late against the Jets in the first preseason game, late in the second quarter, bobbles a catch with Jeff Driscoll throwing him the ball, that was just such a telling moment of where this staff, whatever he thought he had cemented, he had not. That was not cement. That was quicksand. And then I think, if you zoom out and you look at last year, his rookie year, he was hurt, went for 7 touchdowns, 7 TDs on 35 catches. He was really impressive as a rookie. Last year, he took a step back. The whole offense did, but he took a step back. And I think Bieniemy's offense was a mess, but I also think I think Scott Turner did a good job of scheming him free off the line, whether it was bunch formations or motion. And I think without bunch formations or motion, I think the league realized we can jam this kid. He has a tough time getting off the line with some press. And I think that became a much bigger problem. And then last year, on top of that, he was known for his hands coming out of Penn State.
Right.
A really, really pure hands catcher. And last year, I think he was top 10 in the NFL in drop rate. I mean, there are just some drops you could think of top of your head.
Yeah.
And
at important moments, too. It wasn't just that they were happening.
Right. And I think you add all that up, and then I don't think it's fair to act like he has a bad attitude or anything, but maybe he didn't mesh with what they wanted to build.
I think you also have to look at confidence. I mean, to me, that's a big part of any NFL player's game. But you talked about last year with the drops. We saw him, after he was drafted, he was walking around with the football all the time. Great hands, always catching the ball. I think, and we heard him talk about it after the Miami practice, just that he didn't quite have his confidence back, and he didn't feel like he was playing with his full speed. Yeah. And that's a real issue. And one of the things that's interesting is Olamide Zaccheaus was the third wide receiver in Philly last year. Philly essentially let him walk, snap. And then all of a sudden he comes to Washington and has this coaching staff, a buzz about what he's playing, about what he's doing. And I think his play combined with Diami's made it a little bit more palatable to make this trade. I mean, I think this trade
that's extreme wishful thinking.
I think this trade
is hoping that something can happen that has not happened.
Philly was
with a pretty decent sample size.
Philly is willing to bring in a receiver that was beat out by a guy they didn't even want back last year.